All right, just a quick introduction. This is Seth Dellinger, Embodied Dialogue Podcast, and I have Clayton Nyakana. How did I do with the last name? I don't remember. Pretty good.
You did it perfectly.
Okay. I
It's
talked with
like you're born here.
I talked with Adriana Forte recently, who I think you might know, and she's
Yeah.
Brazilian, and I said, "How did I do?" And she's like, "Well, you did it well with an American accent." But Clayton, we spoke once before, and I just want to say that, our first discussion was kind of like around, hey, who are you? Let's get to know each other. And at the end, we said, what about the world? What about what's going on? And like, so I just feel like I don't know where we're going to go, but I feel like that's what's here now. We were just
Mm.
chatting a little bit about the fact that when we come on these calls, it feels really nourishing just to trade ideas. Of course, there's so many discussions you and I have been part of with other people. You were just mentioning the Net, hosted by OG Rose. Um, Guy Sengstock is someone we've both spoken with. But I
Yeah.
don't have a plan other than that. I'm just happy to see you, feeling nourished already by having your face on my screen and hearing your voice. So welcome.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, it's been really good, connecting again. And Paladin Quest is always a weird place for me to go. Oh my God, we're about to do some weird things. But uh I love it because it teaches me something new about myself.
Mhm.
Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, since our last conversation, I've been working on a few little projects for, let's say, for my community. I've been trying to solve this problem of what's the point of intersection between all this, individual philosophical exploration
Mhm.
and taking that and packaging it in a way that is accessible,
Mhm.
uh, for everyone. Like,
Right.
because, you don't know where everyone is at, right? And so the thing that came up was like, okay, I think we ended up with proverbs. No, not the biblical ones, but the concept in general.
Right.
And
Right.
so yeah, me and a friend started another, you'd say, channel where we just take proverbs and explore them, like unpack them. But the way we're doing it is we'll ask someone to record themselves, like like a minute clip telling us their favorite proverb and what it means to them. And then we'll take that and sort of like try to resonate with it and try to take the sense out of it and then share our own experiences of what it makes sense to us. But most importantly, how you can really apply it in form of a life hack.
Mhm.
There's this lady, some Zambian lady who gave a TED talk, and she was articulating that uh, proverbs and sayings are really, pockets of wisdom, like life hacks, really. Like this is
Mhm. Mhm.
that people carry around. And so that was a really good idea. And so we're sort of like taking it to its logical end, see like, is it really true? And yeah, so far it seems to be true. Like people really resonate when you ask them like, what's your favorite proverb? Oh, my favorite proverb. Oh, I have like a few. It's like, but this is the one like I really use, and here's the situation in which I use it. And here's how it really helps me reorient myself. You go like, wow, I did not know that that is the place where you go when you want to tap into people's wisdom. But it seems so obvious, right? Like, why did we not just go there?
That's great. I mean,
Yeah.
when I'm listening to you, what occurs to me as a proverb is something that gets repeated a lot, right? Like the reason it is a proverb is that someone said it and someone else thought it was worth saying again, and it gets repeated and it just becomes this resonant phrase. Of course, some of them can turn into cliches, but
Yeah.
for the right person in the right moment, the proverb is catching uh, something vital. And of course, some might be deliberately like, oh, this is something we're going to pass on to the next generation. we're going to share the proverb that we learned from our ancestors and pass it on like that. But it could also just be, I mean, there's also what we have now, which is what they call memes. Like people just, in fact, people are putting out a particular phrase, but they're literally promoting a phrase by repetition on social media, or politicians do this. Um, yeah, so I was just interested in that sense that a proverb just sort of organically might arise. Although I guess as I was thinking out loud, it could arise in different ways. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious, like if there was any of these proverbs that were particularly like surprising for you, or something that unfolded as you explored one of the proverbs.
Well, the most interesting one, I think, is like we even ended up deciding to do it fast. Like it really comes from a, a place where my wife comes from, like her homeland. Uh, and it sort of like summarized itself as, if you like giving energy to something that doesn't reciprocate,
Hmm.
uh, is sort of like the wind blowing against a rock.
Ah,
And
uh-huh, uh-huh.
and you go like, oh, that's an interesting image. And so we sort of like we played with that, but it's sort of like really, really in the modern day times, like you find a lot of us spending time on things that it's not gonna give the energy back. Like, why spending all that energy there?
Right.
But you don't know though. Like, you don't expect that the energy needs to be reciprocated, and you don't even know how to resonate with that at all. And so you're just sort of like trapped in it. Like you see how
Yeah.
people easily get sucked into their devices, and they get isolated from uh, connecting with other people in situations. And you're going like, no, 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 direct your energy to another human. They're gonna reciprocate it, and then you guys will have the things like. No, leave me alone. I just want to be on my device. And you go like, oh, missed
Uh-huh.
opportunity.
Well, that's
Yeah.
great because, and you just gave that very specific example, like the person who's curled up with technology and not connecting to other people. But just when you said wind blowing on a rock, immediately I had this kind of a somatic response. Like imagine a heavy rock and I'm like blowing on it, trying to get it to move. And it's just like, it's the most, futile kind of thing. And yet, like it really gave me an experience of like, oh yeah, sometimes I do try to do things that actually I have no leverage, and yet I keep trying. And it's like there's something like immediately, even before you explain it, it's just like wind blowing on rock. Yeah, I think I know what that's like. Like, and so it speaks to the body as well as to the conceptual mind. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I really like about that.
Yeah, no, it's been phenomenal. And but the most interesting thing is like, and I think John speaks about this, like uh people will not treat themselves as being wise. And I think like in wisdom circles, like they'll speak about your wise self, the sage. And we don't usually perceive ourselves as being that or having that within us until we're put in a situation that
Mhm.
sort of like, until someone sort of like tunes us to the place where we can share some of it, then we go like, oh, wait, did I actually say that?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's like the,
Yeah,
the, the wiser you was always there.
I want to double click on this because we talked about this quite a bit last time. And then even just in the beginning here, when you talked about your, um, like, I think it may be fair to say that you have a kind of a calling to make things accessible. And even when I introduced and I said OG Rose and Guy Sengstock, my next thought was like, well, some people might have no clue who I'm talking about. So you and I have certain associations, but if I'm not careful, I could alienate someone listening to us just because I suggest that, well, you really need to know these references. And I feel like what you're doing with the Proverbs is saying, look, let's just take this one phrase that arises organically out of sort of everyday experience. Maybe this particular proverb is from this culture. This came from your wife. Is she originally from Uganda as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
She's from the
Uganda
western part
probably.
of Uganda. Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
Ugandan one, this one.
right. But I mean, so someone like this was part of what we talked about before. Like you came from Uganda to Australia, you start listening to, lectures by this cognitive neuroscientist, and then engaging. But a lot of people from Uganda would have no reference. And if we started talking about the work of John Vervaeke, even though things John Vervaeke says might be fully applicable in Uganda, his name or
The
using his
word.
terminology could turn someone off. And I feel like this is one of the big something I feel is when I go online to these kinds of spaces and learn, it's really important that I do extra work to understand how would I say this another way. Like how would I take, I mean, I haven't read philosophy much, but I've listened to people who are referring to Heidegger and Nietzsche and Plato, and like I haven't even read these people. So really, the ideas I'm getting are coming from those people,
Mm.
and anyway, it seems like that's a value that you hold that you've put
Yes,
a lot of emphasis on.
definitely. For me, it's like uh, the first place I want to be able to apply these ideas and these concepts is just to myself. Like, okay, does it make sense to me? Can I apply it in my everyday? Will it help me overcome some of my daily challenges? Uh, and if I can do that, then I'll probably go to my family next. It's like, can it help my child? Can it help my partner? How can it help us as a household? Can I then, progress it to my neighbors, right?
Mhm.
And if I can do that, then at that point, it's sort of like it has really immersed itself in my way of living. And so then I feel this responsibility. It's like, well, I need to keep, expanding the breadth of this to as many people as I can. And but the way to do it, like what you learn from all these traditions is like, well, first you have to acknowledge where people are at and how they're seeing and how they're understanding. uh, it's like you have to do that work of translating this idea and way of doing things to fit their context, and then it's going to be obvious. Like it will make sense, then it will be helpful, then they may consider it. But many times, like if you look at the education space, there's this presumption that I can just hammer it down your throat
Right,
and you should just take it, like it should just make sense. And I don't think so. I don't think that has worked for many people. I mean, like there are probably some situations where it works,
Mhm.
but most of the time it's much harder to do it that way. There's a lot of friction, uh, which is
Yeah,
not necessary. And
right,
and yet if you try, like you guys have been speaking about authentic resonance, it's like if you really try to resonate with what's going on, like the shape of it and
Mhm.
how it's coming to them, how it's how they're getting it and how you're getting them, you will then the right shape will sort of like emerge, and then you'll know that, oh, this is where we bring this in. Yeah.
right, right. Yeah. So this idea of authentic resonance, and let's not assume that other people know what I'm talking about, but I've been in a series of conversations with Daniel Garner and Aspasia Kara George, or two of the people we both know in common. And Aspasia had this idea of authentic resonance. She's a clinical psychologist, and of course, psychologists are often talking about and sort of exploring with people like their pathologies, like what's wrong. But I think what Aspasia's idea was like, what if everything goes right? Like, what would we call that when it's really working? Um, and so we just started exploring. We've had a whole series of conversations, and something that came to me as I was trying, I just put out some information about the latest conversation, and I'm always like, well, how do we summarize this? It is this problem. Like, how do I not make this sound like something that no one could understand? That's so, but what I came up with is I think authentic resonance is something like the the beating heart at the center of what we call flow. Like we could
Mm,
describe the flow state, and it sounds like this great thing, but it's also general. Like, oh, I'm in
mm,
flow. Like, well, how does that actually work? Like, how do you stay in flow? What ruins the flow? What about the fact that you feel in flow, but then someone who's in a bad mood comes around? Then what happens to your flow? And all of these things. And just to come back to what you were saying, because I do think authentic resonance is a good phrase for what we're talking about here, is what I'm hearing you say is, okay, if I learn a new concept, the way I prove it is in my own life. So I could listen to the podcast and someone says something that sounds smart, and I can think that sounds smart, and I can write it on my notebook, but it's not finished yet. It's like it's only when I prove it through, like, oh, I can apply this and I'm feeling different based on a new behavior I enacted by testing that out, that testing that idea out in life in an embodied way. And yeah, because I think just to come back to the situation where maybe we encounter the ideas for the first time, the trap, and I feel like this is a trap I was caught in for much of my life, is I can think that the goal here is to nod my head and understand and look like I'm participating in this conversation just like the other smart people. And, I can think that sounding smart or looking smart or asking a really smart question that someone appreciates the question, that this is already the end product and that I've made it if smart people tell me that I'm smart or something like this. And yet, this can all happen without me doing anything in my daily life to act differently. And so, and I think we can delude ourselves. I mean, I know that there's been times where I get really excited about some idea and I feel like I've made it already, even though I haven't really put the idea to the test just yet. So I can like
mm.
prematurely think, oh, I watched this podcast and now I understand how something works. It's like, well, go give it a try and then see, because you might need to tweak it a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's spot on. Like you always have to do the work. Like and one thing that's sort of like come up, like I was having a chat with a friend over the last maybe couple of weeks now, and we're sort of like trying to explore this idea of work. Like their interpretation of work is very different from my interpretation of work. And so we're sort of like going down a bit of a rabbit hole there. Um, but in that exploration, we came to a place whereby we're trying to understand, ask them, so when you say something is correct and you say something is right, do you believe those to be the same thing? And they said, yeah, that correct is right and right is correct. And that was interesting for me because for me, they're different. It's like, so I try to, articulate and I'll try this on you. Let's see how it goes. So my understanding was that right is sort of like emerges from, it's somatic. It's like it's a feeling. Right is a feeling. You feel right. And when you feel right, it's correct in a deeper way for you because like it aligns with your, for lack of a better description, like it aligns with your spirit, your sense of correctness, your sense of truth. Uh, However, once you let's maybe put it in the scenario. So let's say you've been trying to learn to do something, or you're making a dish, right? And you have a taste to
Mhm.
see if it tastes right. Yeah. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
you make some adjustments and then you taste again. And then eventually it tastes right, which we really don't, which we can't say outside because you just felt it. It's like, yeah, I tasted it and it tasted right. Great. Now you're meant to write a recipe so that it can be exported outside of you for other people to consume.
Mhm.
And immediately once you do that, once you export this sense of right from your experience, you now have to make it correct because you're sort of like boxing it. Remember at the time when you experienced it, it was very flowy and it was like a bit buzzy at the edges. It wasn't like very specific, but now you have to put it in a box and say, okay, so if you put 3 spoons of this and 2 spoons of that and this much of this, it should get it to a place where it is you if you try it, you get the experience of right. But that's going to be up to you to tune it further. This is the part they don't say in the recipe. It's like you're going to have to tune it further to get it to like really be in alignment with you. So you get that, you know, you resonate with it at the correct level such that you get the experience of right. And so it's like as if what is correct is outside of us and has been sort of like generalized, like made less specific for so that everyone can be able to access it. However, it's like whatever has been generalized, like in some sort of like structure, framework, or a rule, still requires you to personalize it
Mhm.
when you interact with it. You personalize it in such a way that it can align with your own person. Like you bring your person to it. You bring your, what Vivek would call your personhood to this thing, and the two come together, and a new experience is going to emerge, which could give you a feeling of right. And
Mhm.
so it's like the right feeling has a relationship to what we call correct, but correct is external to us, and right is internal to us. And the two we sort of like have to keep doing the work of taking what is correct and personalizing it so that we can use it. But we shouldn't expect that whatever is correct is ready to use. Like we still have to kind of like,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
just a starter pack,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that this
Yeah.
resonates for me. I could say a lot, but I'm curious what happened for your friend who thought that right and correct were the same thing when you said that. Was he open to it, or did you
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
yourself
No,
some resistance, or what
we're
happened?
still we're still we're still having the conversation. We're still
Uh-huh.
having the conversation, but it's going towards that. At least they're sharing with me that they're starting to notice that difference between what is right and what is correct because like, oh, I thought you just take it off the shelf and it should just work.
Yeah.
And now, they realize, no, I still have to kind of like understand how I work and I need to see if it works for me. How do I adjust myself? And to get to a place where it could work or
Right.
not, and then
Right.
make a choice. Like Daniel would say, like make the ultimate choice or something like that,
Mhm.
right?
Well, I think the conversation you're having with your friend, these kinds of conversations are vital because there's so many places in our lives where we've been told by some authority that this is the correct way to do the thing. And I mean, if we make that dish together, when you taste it and say it's right, I might taste it and say it needs more salt because it's just
Yeah,
what's right for you, what's right for me is going to be personal on some level. But then again, if we were running a restaurant, we would probably want to create more or less a recipe that, you know, but it's these are the challenges, right? And I feel like right or correct it just those words often don't have a built-in malleability when we hear it, like a built-in like because of course the recipe book might just say add salt to taste, knowing that at this point in the recipe some people will want more salt, some people will want less, and there's always certain constraints in the medium. So if we're writing a recipe book, in the end, we're going to put a bunch of words on the page and then we're going to send it to the printer. And it's just like those are the words we put on the page and we can't move them around anymore. But yeah, if we have a paragraph about personalizing for you, then it adds a little modular possibility. But I feel like, there's just so many ways. I mean, the obvious one would be politics, but where we just don't have that flexibility with each other. But I think what shows up again and again in these kinds of conversations is like every word we say is potentially an avenue of co-exploration, right? Like, of course, we might decide there's a lot of rabbit holes we don't want to go down. Like we want to, but I mean, just to know that there are rabbit holes everywhere, I think is I just think it's how it is, and yet we often try to pretend that things are so much simpler. And you know, there could be a danger of making it too complex. You want people to stay on board. But I think with a friend, just pausing at any point in a conversation said, when you use that word, what do you mean with that word? This is I think very valuable, very necessary in this time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it does really help to sort of like appreciate, and it takes a bit of like respect as well, that oh yeah, I might know you say it, and we've had lots of conversation, and but we haven't like had all the potential conversations we could have. And you're probably gonna say something and I'm going like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Right? Like I don't know what you mean when you say that. And then we open a new door, like we go down another rabbit hole. Uh, but having the courage to do that, I guess, like it sort of it it gives the character of the nature of the relationship and allows the relationships to grow if you have that flexibility, that level of openness, whereby that difference is always welcome, like accepting that, okay, look, it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that I know you less, or
Right.
that I stopped, like I don't want to participate with you anymore just because now we have a point of difference,
Mhm.
or that I haven't gotten to know what you mean by this. Like it shouldn't be automatic. I guess the point of it is the ability to continuously do that in a safe and kind way, and
Mhm.
just keep learning, with company, right?
Right, right. Well, it occurs to me that we could have a model of friendship that says, "Oh yeah, we have the same interests, and we're going to confirm that that's true." And then maybe if we confirm that we like all of the same things, then we know we're really good friends. But another way to say it, I was just hearing Bonita Roy say this on a discussion I was listening to today. But our friend Guy Sengstock would say this as well. It's like another way to look at my friend is just to continuously remind myself that I have no idea who you are. That you are actually an infinite mystery, even if we've known each other for years and had all kinds of conversations. The fact that I might even be aware of certain preferences of yours or certain concepts that resonate for you, there's still just there's always another doorway, another pathway, that's leading somewhere else that might completely surprise me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That's so true. Like, well, we're these deep mysteries that even we're so mystical to ourselves that
Mm.
if we, it's
Right,
like if
right.
you
I don't
ask me
even
who
know
I
who I
was
am,
yesterday,
let
yeah,
alone
it's like you
you.
asked me who I was yesterday, I don't know. I know who I'm trying to be today.
Right, right, right. Well,
Yeah.
so it's funny because there's a few things that I thought would be interesting to talk with you about. But just now, as we were getting this point in the conversation, it even occurred to me it would be a different thing to just say, hey, here's a subject that I want to bring up versus, just noticing where are we getting to. And I mean, they're both completely valid as things to do. But the other thing I could do is just say, well, there's something that I think would be a good topic for me to talk about. So I would sound really impressive. So I want to make sure that we bring that theme up, and then I can, say my smart stuff, and then hopefully you'll be impressed. And
Well, say, I want to hear this smart idea. It could make me smarter.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what I had on my mind, and I have plenty to say, but I'll just open it as a question. It is very general, but it's something that everyone in the whole world seems to be talking about. So, I'm curious how artificial intelligence may have, uh, been in your life or not been in your life, or you're talking to others. Um, how does this growing phenomenon in the world show up for you, and what are some of your thoughts about it?
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah, fun, But I figured, if we had a big one, then it'd be fun. So that was my
Yeah,
that was my smart
yeah,
idea. Smart, right?
it is great. Like it's so good, smart, and so huge. Yeah, so for a little bit of background, so I work in technology, so we're dealing with
Uh-huh.
this problem on a daily basis.
Yeah.
If I characterize it as a problem or opportunity. Um, but yeah, artificial intelligence is it's a pretty interesting phenomena. Like if for someone who works in an area where you understand a lot about the technology that it's built on, it's quite fascinating to see how uh, people out in the wild, if I may call it that way, how they resonate with it, how they respond to it.
Mhm.
Uh, when when they discovered that people were responding to the chat version of this intelligence really well, when ChatGPT came out, it was such a huge thing. It's like the world changed, you know, at that moment. Uh, but it was fascinating when you'd see someone try to use it for the first time who's not from the tech world, because like I would go into this chat device and they'll speak about prompt engineering. It's like there's a way you have to say things for it to be able to respond. Uh, and every word means something to it in a certain way. And so you have to be careful with your language. But you have to imagine there's someone on that side who's going to type it back, because that's essentially how it started. It's like I type it to you and you type it back. And so it's been trained to respond that way.
Mm.
But you give it to someone who hasn't used like, oh, I thought you just tell it things and it does them. It's like, no, no, it's a relational engagement. You have to
Mm.
say your pleases and your thank yous, and you have to really talk like you're talking to someone. You have to take it seriously. And it goes like, but it's not a real human. It's like that doesn't matter. You have to imagine there's someone there. If you imagine that, then you're going to give your request in a form that it's been trained to respond to correctly. It's not about there being a human or it being human. It's about how you're showing up, right?
Yeah.
But people go like, but it's not human. It's like, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that doesn't matter.
Mm.
And for me, like I found that so fascinating because I was like, it, just treat it like, it's a person and it will give you the best results. If you don't treat it like a person, it will give you your request is not going to be clear in terms of like how it has to process it. You
Mhm.
have to understand that it's learning, it's trying to figure you out, but it can only do that. It's like a mirror, right? Like if
Mhm.
you if you cover part of your face and you go to the mirror is not going to do a good job of seeing you through whatever you're covering your face with and then reflect you the face. No, it will only show you what it sees. And so if you want a clearer image, you're going to have to show up with lighting and be
Right.
in a way that you
Right.
can be seen such that you can be responded to. And when you explain these things, like, but it doesn't think. Like, yeah, it doesn't, but it's going to reflect back to you only as well as you reflect to it.
Yeah. So
Uh,
it's
uh,
kind of like
yeah.
I mean, first of all, you're coming from a little more of a informed background since you're working in tech already, and you sort of maybe it's not as mystical to you as it is to a lot of people who are interacting with it. But I hear you talking about, I think this is a big question. Do I treat it as a person or not? And then you also used the word mirror. It can be like a mirror. And I mean, of course, we could sit around and try to imagine the future and what will this technology be capable of and all of this. But something that I've been really curious about from the beginning, and I think this is a conversation now, is how does it affect just relationality in general? Like, even me talking to you today, how is this conversation informed by the fact that last evening I was chatting with AI? Is there something about those two conversations which are obviously not of the same character, and yet they both feel like call and response? I said something, you said something. I said something,
Mm.
AI said something. So there's an obvious parallel in the experience of me talking with you and me chatting with AI, but of course they're not equal. And so one big question is for me, but for anyone, how much clarity do I have on what's the same and what's different between these two contexts? And do I just treat them as equal when they're not, or do I notice that there's certain affordances here that I can't get over there?
Yeah.
Um, and then just the other thing, I'm sure you'll have plenty to say already, but because that conversation I think is very prominent, and a conversation that's even more dear to my heart in some ways, but I think it's tied in, and I run into less is what does it feel like in my body to chat with the AI?
Mm.
I'll never forget the first time I said, let me try this thing out. Let me ask it some crazy question that only a human could answer. And I got an answer that sounded very human. The first time that happened, I remember it was almost like a shock in my body. Like, I'm thinking of John Vervaeke, how he describes horror, right? It was like there was a way that it didn't make sense except for the fact that it clearly just happened. It's like I
Mm.
felt my reality shift on me, and I was a little like taken aback. And now, of course, anything like that, you do it many times, you start to tell yourself, oh, it becomes familiar. But
Mm.
another experience I've had is like if I'm developing an idea and I'm chatting with AI, and AI, it's very good at summarizing and condensing things. So I might say 25 different things and it sort of gives it back to me in a few phrases, and I'm like, that's exactly what I mean. And so it's my thinking is advancing, but I have the experience that sometimes the thinking advances almost too fast. And then it's like, would you like me to make a list, or would you like me to draft a letter to that person for you? And it's accelerating me. It's actually maybe accelerating me in the direction I want to go, but it's like if I was in a car driving uncomfortably fast, towards
Mm.
my destination, but it's like, oh my God, I have to, so I find that there's something that happens in the nervous system when I'm with AI that I actually have to really like something I've noticed is every once in a while, I would really be a good idea for me to stand up and walk away from the screen, maybe even walk outside and think about the last thing the AI said rather than just keep typing and another thing comes, because in that sense, the rhythm is so different.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's a lot there, but that's kind of part of what I've really been thinking about in relation to this.
It's really good that I like that part about how quickly every interaction starts to feel, and how it sort of like expands it so quickly and pushes it, you know, way farther. It's like, ah, how do I even describe it? Oh my God. Uh, I was having a chat to my 10-year-old son the other day about the concept of discipline, right?
Mm,
And he asked me, so what is that? And so I told him, from my understanding, discipline is the ability to stop.
mm.
And he was like, what do
Yeah.
you mean to stop? Right? I was like, well, you can do anything infinitely, right? Like you can do anything without stopping if you wanted to until you run out of resources. But knowing how much of something to do and stop, uh, that is the thing people mean by discipline. Like, oh, you're so disciplined. It's like, yeah, what do they mean? Oh, you know when to stop certain things and start other things. Because every time you can stop, then it means you can also start something else. but knowing how much of something to do and stop, and then start the next thing, and which the next thing is going to be that is going to allow the continuation. So all of that. Uh, AI doesn't have discipline.
Right. Right.
That is like from your description as well, and my experience, I have noticed that. So if you ask it anything, it's going to be trying to maximally answer this to the maximum that it can, with
Mhm.
the hope that a maximum answer is is meaningful, is deeply meaningful.
Right.
But as we know in human experience, that is not the case. Like when someone is repeating themselves, explaining the same thing repeatedly, continuously, our feeling of that is like, I don't think they know what they're saying because
Mm.
they've said that again, they've said it again. I don't
Mhm.
know what they're saying. I don't think they know what they're saying. I think we're lost,
Mm.
right? It's like in the flow, it's like we've ended up somewhere we don't know, and we don't know that we're lost, and so now we're spinning our wheels, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so AI doesn't know when that happens. And an interesting experiment, you should try this. Like ask, like in a chat flow, ask it about the same thing about 5 times. Like ask it and it's gonna say, it will give you an answer, repeat the question, it will change the answer,
Mhm.
repeat the same question, it will change it again. And by the time you get to the fifth repetition, it will now be confused. It won't be able to make sense. Like you read through and it's like it no longer knows what to say. It's exhausted because it thinks it gave you everything possible of how it gave you all the possible combinations of this information that if you say it thinks like that it can imagine.
Yeah,
And
you know what I think is really
yeah,
interesting there. So I've been doing a lot of experiments, and what I hear you describing there is something I've been doing in other ways, but it's essentially like breaking it, right?
yeah,
And you might say, well, why do we want to break it? Why do we want to be confused? We want to get, results. But it's I think it's really important to understand what it doesn't do, so that because it is, the first time you get this very apparently human-ish answer, you can jump to that conclusion. Oh, it's intelligent and all of these things. And there's just like this enormous narrative that begins to run in the background, even if I don't articulate it. Whereas there's actually very concrete limits to it. And then, I mean, the other thing I find fascinating is there is also a big unknown about what is the line of can and can't do, and the thing is accelerating and being changed. But when you
mhm.
were, first of all, I love the definition of discipline. I love how concise it is, which is something that AI often doesn't do unless you tell it only give me 100 words, because it'll also just give you like, you know, an article
Big,
for everything you ask. But I love that because when you said it's the capacity to be able to stop, um, it took me back to the conversation I was just having with Aspasia and Daniel, and we were talking about learning. And one of the things that Daniel was evoking from the Bible was the idea of the Sabbath, right? The day of rest. And in a context of learning, the rest, you're still learning when you stop doing. You're still processing, you're finding out. So um, if I do 5 things in a row that advance me towards where I want to go, whether it's AI or not, the lack of discipline would be that temptation. Ooh, I'm going to get even, let me take this step number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But to pause after 5 steps, even if everything's going well, is to really feel what that was, and to just breathe with, okay, this is what it's like to be at the halfway point rather than I have to get to the finish line. Um, and I'm also just touched imagining your 10-year-old son, because by the time he's our age, he will have been around these kinds of technologies his whole life. And this is another enormous question, is the braiding of the generations. And
yeah.
I have a 16-year-old daughter, and it's just can't assume the world looks anything like what it looks like to us for them.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't see it the same way at all. And there's a lot of trust being given to these platforms, to these AIs that, see, it's very similar to the mistrust that they were being given at the start. Now it seems they've proven themselves to be useful. So now we're giving them too much trust as well. Like we're forgetting to uh know when to stop, right? Like it's like, okay, the whatever the AI says, I have to take it with a pinch of salt because I have to now think like, going back to what we're speaking about at the beginning, like I have to make it right, right? Okay, whatever the AI is saying may be correct, but how do I make it right? Yeah. And how does it like really apply in my understanding? Because uh it's sort of like reflecting back how I'm showing up. Like we really need to uh, understand that and accept that. But most importantly, knowing how much of it, because like you're saying, like you ask it a little thing, it gives you an article. If your question is not like as precise, each response is not going to be as precise. And so you can easily get sucked into that. Uh, but also, it's really important to know that you can break it and you need to see how it looks when it's broken and how it looks when it's incoherent so that you can be able to tell because it's a whole pattern recognition thing, and that's what we don't see at the start because like you kind of like ask it a question and it says something like, oh my god, that sounds so real. um but like they say, the devil is in the detail, right? Like if you like really try to resonate with what it's saying, how it's saying, the word choices it's using, uh the context it's trying to kind of like speak from,
Mhm.
then you start to see the cracks in its propositions. And one interesting thing about us humans is we're very consistent. Like we can't escape our person. Like
Mhm.
the person who we are is like, you know, that's who we are. And the reason I guess like we we like this idea of being an individual is because yeah, you can't duplicate Seth. Like there's one Seth. Like it doesn't matter where you go in the collection of 8 billion plus, there's only going to be one of him, and he shows up a certain way. There's a certain quality to Seth. And when you interact with Seth, it's like, oh, that is Seth. Like if Seth made the sauce and I tasted and it's a little too salty for me, it's like, oh wait, what happened with this one? Who made it? And it was Seth. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Uh,
Makes sense. That's all right. He
that
loves his
explains it.
salt. Yeah, that explains it. But it's like when you bring the person together with the phenomena that happened, you kind of go like, oh no, it makes sense. It's not wrong. It's just his expression, right?
Right.
And that's the weird thing. Like the AI, we're still trying to figure out the expression of the AI, all the expressions of the AI, such that we can know the person of the AI. But because it's a huge data set on a huge collective, it feels like it can be anyone,
Mhm.
which
Right.
which then makes it feel so powerful. It's like, oh my God, it's all of us at the same time. But at the same time, it's also none of us because like, oh, I can't really,
Right.
I don't know. It's person because our person really comes from, our limits.
Yeah.
All the things we fail to know how to stop.
Right.
Those make us who we are.
Well, I want to come back to this word accessibility, which has been such a concern for you. And last time, part of what we talked about were some of the dialogical practices. Our conversation today sort of plays in some of those spaces, but you were talking a lot about introducing forms of dialogue to people who maybe like that example of your friend who says right and correct are the same thing, and just I want to know what the right way is, and then when I can do it right, and then there's like you introduce a more open-ended conversation, like, well, what if we make a distinction between right and correct? But even having that conversation is a new thing for many people, and this might just be largely a result of, upbringing, or, have I had access to this kind of, if I'm in a context where I just have to worry about basic survival all the time, well, how am I going to have a bunch of exploratory conversations that open my mind to all of these new things? Um, but the other thing that, even if, well, I don't know how much we want to keep going with AI or not, but one of the things that I think we could say that AI represents is just another one of the stages of this process of the world becoming more connected in all ways. So
Mm.
you could be in Australia or Uganda or the United States, and if you have that technology, we could access the wisdom of Indonesia or China, or
Yeah.
neuroscience from 3 years ago. I mean, there's a cutoff date, sometime recently, but like we can pull all of these things together and potentially, even though of course it's uneven, um, depending on really there's still tons of people who are not accessing AI all the time because it really depends on socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
But the elites of the world are trying to push this thing into all corners. And of course, they have their own agenda for what they want it to be. I think, there's pretty clear trend towards just hyper surveillance of everything that will happen through this. And yet, it could have that impact of someone, learning about wisdom traditions from other cultures. Or one of the things I always come back to, because it's one of the more exciting things that I've heard, is it's not ruled out now that maybe we could begin to map the speech patterns of other species. Like there's a person I was just looking up, I hope maybe to invite him on a podcast, who's like been mapping whale song with AI. And it's like, I don't even know what this means. I'm gonna have to ask them, but apparently they say that whales have a series of phonetics. And I'm like, wow, like I want to know. So anyway, sorry, I'm going all over the place, but the idea was like, uh with this incredible resource, okay, there's the parts that are potentially dangerous, but then there's just the power of it. And then this theme of accessibility that's so important to you. I wonder, um,
All the two come
how you
together.
would
Yeah.
so was that just a little question for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, it's good. Like, it's been like I would say, it's something I've actually been exploring to see how to utilize it in that direction, right? Like one interesting thing I noticed, like my culture and traditions where I come from, um, they're oral traditions and cultures, right? Like they're not like documented. So one of the areas I've been really interested in is like finding out how can we leverage all these advancements to start capturing all these you know traditions that we may lose, and modernize them, not just modernize them, but make them accessible. Like like living here where I live, like I don't get many people who speak my native tongue, right? But I would want my children to be able to learn some of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I try to teach them best as I can. Uh, but you see, as you know, probably we might have discussed on some other conversations, like language is doesn't it's a communal artifact, right? Like you still need it has it needs a body, and its body is like a community. It's not just a few people. It's like if I give you the dictionary and give you all this information, you could learn how everything sounds, but until you embed yourself in a group of people who actually live that language, you will not yet have learned it. And once you get that experience, you go like, oh, now I understand what all these things mean in all these ways.
Mhm.
And so that is part of the problem I'm trying to work on. It's like, how do we bridge that gap? How do we utilize all these AIs, like train a model to be able to teach like the native tongue, such that I can then use that, we can then uh, work with the model, like have a three-way conversation, me, my child, and the model, and then we sort of like make our little pocket of a community and then learn to speak the language together. I think that would be
Is that
very
something
interesting.
you've been doing is trying to train model AIs, like creating your own GPTs and that kind of thing?
Well, it's something I'm still working on. That's the goal. I wish we can get it there such that we can have a dialogue in a specific native language with it.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I because they're doing it now for English, right? Like, and I think a few other people have done it for different languages. But uh, of course, some of our native tongues don't have, you'd say, the people who run these big conglomerates that are behind these organizations.
Right.
But the technology is accessible. So like we can try for ourselves and kind of like see where we get to. Yeah.
Well, I would like too that you said we would create a context where me and my son, and so like maybe your son interacts with the AI and it can remember a lot of things and help, but you're the human correction that
Yeah.
comes in. And so if he tells you, "Hey, Dad, the AI said this," you could be like, "Well, actually, this is how we would use
Yeah.
that
This
phrase."
is what,
But
yeah.
because the AI, the funny thing is it will just as easily pretend to speak your native tongue when it doesn't know how to do it. It'll just make something
It
up.
does. It makes a lot of stuff up. Like if you ask it, it doesn't feel like it can't answer, which is it doesn't know when to stop. Because you go like,
Right.
explain this phrase to me. It's in this language, and it will try its best, which is a good intention. Like it's coming with a can-do attitude, but then it's sort of like really goes off course, and it's like, no, I don't know. I don't think you know any of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have a lot of those pockets of things happening. But yeah, for me, that would be like a good place to go in terms of like solving the accessibility problem. But it is a lot of work because, where you gather this training data, finding, because none of it is documented, right? And so you sort of like have to do the documentation because AI as a tool is sort of like trying to extend from all our information age advancements. It's like, all the writing, all the collecting, all that information. It's like now we're building an automated way of like quickly running through it. Great. But some of our cultures and traditions are still trying to sort of like capture the information. Like it's there, but it's not captured. And so, how do we quickly capture it? And I feel like, yeah, we can integrate AI in tools of capture, like let's say conversation recordings, and feed it directly into an AI and train it, and it can learn from that, and then go from there to sort of be able to mimic in a in a more accurate way and by accurate I mean like in a way that people will feel like, okay, it's being helpful, it's being useful in that
Right.
situation. Yeah, but we have to do a lot of work to correct it and give it the context because it lives in a box. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't really
Yeah.
know what the world is like yet.
Well,
Yeah.
if we could just understand that often what it's doing is, as you just said, it's mimicking something, then you can ask the question like, what is the value of mimicking? And it has a certain value, but obviously you want to know what's mimicking and what's true expression or what is original expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I also wonder, if someone listening would feel like, oh gosh, I'm sick of hearing about all of this. It's kind of like it's washing over us now. But I'm really appreciating this perspective, and I think the specific question you're asking about language and like passing on your native tongue to your son, these are the kinds of real world things that let's just say without AI, you might think like I know a guy who's here in the US and he's Portuguese and his children, you talk about discipline, till they were like 12, he just only spoke to them in Portuguese. And he would turn to his wife and speak in English, but every time he turned to the kids, it was like a rule. But he had to
Mm,
be that discipline for all of that time. So it's not that we can't accomplish these things without it, but the real question I think that's interesting is what are the things that I actually want to accomplish? And then if
mm,
this tool is going to help me, how do I not get derailed by it? But how do I, like, in other words, what is my independent motivation separate from, oh
mm.
my gosh, this technology can do this, it can do that. Let's find out what it can do, which can be interesting. But there would be something really meaningful if your son
Yeah.
grew up um, and had the language, in his body.
Oh, it would be so beautiful, and it would help him to understand certain things about himself that he
Mhm.
may not be able to understand if he doesn't have the language. Because like we underestimate the power of that language, but it does it does explain our person to us. Like we're saying before, like we're mysteries uh that even we that are mystical to ourselves because like we don't really know. But in the process of trying to better participate with ourselves, language is really helpful. And uh, and I think Vivek talks about this, like how you have a mother tongue, you also have like a mother religion, and the whole idea of mother is like the first thing that you got to experience. Uh, yeah, I like that idea because I feel like even as persons, we have like I try to borrow that idea and extend it as you have like your language, the language of who you are, the language of your person, or the language of your experience, and
Mhm.
you need to really spend time understanding what that language is because then you're going to learn how to work with this person as opposed to trying to be correct, right? You're going to
Mhm.
learn how to work to in a way that is right for you, in a way that resonates and helps you to stay attuned and in the right place at the right time, with the flow, as opposed to working against it, or uh, it's more efficient to work with it, I guess. And
Mhm.
for you to be able to work with it, you need to know how it works. You need a certain level of understanding of the discipline of what not to do and when to
Right,
stop.
right.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
feels like a very ignorant question because I don't know, but is the language, is it called Ugandan or what is the native tongue? Um,
Oh, we have like 56 of them.
there are many. Okay, so what is what's the language that you are trying to pass on to your son? And if it's not too much, I would even love to hear you speak even a few phrases just to feel the sound of it.
Oh yeah, so the language is Runyoro. It's from the western part of Uganda. Um, it has
Runyoro,
a yeah, Runyoro. Like
Runyoro. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So we use a lot of vowels, and the vowels sort of like give you the syllable in the word, and that was the interesting part, like explaining uh, that structure to someone who has spoken a lot of English and explaining that we don't have silent sounds in our language. All the sounds are audible and
Mm,
they're very much. revolving around the vowels, and
Mhm.
so that is how it works. And when you read bu, it's boo, it's not ba, right? But in English, it could be ba, right? And it could be bu, and those are very. We don't have that. It's bu is boo, and that's it. And it's
There's one sound that will always be consistent if you're writing it out.
yes,
Uh-huh.
and it only shifts with intonation,
Hmm.
right? For example, if I say, how do I say? Let's say if I say nkugonza ebyokulya, what that means is I want food, right? Uh, but the intonation matters, right? The way I say kugonza in different contexts, I could mean love, I could mean like, I could mean something else, but it has the intonation plus what I said go together to give you the meaning,
Is it
right?
something like that word means something like desire, but it could be a strong desire, a small
Yes.
desire, and then
Yes.
literally, if I go when I say it versus it's just like oh, it's already.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that because I personally
I love
have
how you described it. I really love how you described it. I was like, oh wait, it's speaking to the desire, not the because like you get so trapped in the scientific thinking. It's like, oh,
right.
you think about it externally instead of thinking about
Well, if
internally.
I just if there were, I mean, of course, in English we have 52 different versions of saying I want, I desire, I long for. But if I only had one word, and yet there was be, it's very different how I desire to have this conversation versus I desire,
Yeah.
to have something to eat or all of these other desires I could have. Um, but if there was only one word, and yet I got to use the musicality of the expression to do. I mean, is that fair to say in is it Runyoro? Runyoro?
Yeah,
Is
Runyoro, yes.
musicality actually a sort of a more active aspect of the language?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. The musicality. Oh my God, this is fantastic. It's like when you add the musical aspect, there's a sing song in there, like how people speak. There's a way to say certain things.
Right.
And when you listen to it at a broader scope, uh it's almost like the, the musicality as you describe it. It's like that gives you the spirit of what's going on. It's like when you listen to how it's being said, the how it's flowing, you go like, oh, this is what they mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Because now I guess that is part of the challenge of documenting these oral traditions, because you go like,
How
I
do
don't
you
think we can write that down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it's too much. It's too analog for it to be digitized.
Hmm.
And it's like so big that if you try to digitize it, you're gonna be stuck on one little bit for a long time. And I guess this is where like, like AIs have the power to be able to sort of like do it a bit faster than if you're doing it manually. And they should be able, like, I imagine that they should be able to help with this sort of like translating of what is analog. It's like these big things that are really analog into a more digital way that can now be, captured and experimented on and worked with. But the when it's embodied and when it's in practice, it's so huge that only if you're in there and
Hmm.
uh, then you're not gonna like. I'll give you an example, right? So I'm a Nyoro, right? Like and what that means is that my father is a Nyoro, so I fall under his lineage, right? But my mom comes from a different tribe, which is called Toro. So they're a sect of Banyoro. Like they left this tribe and went started another tribe. and they speak the same language, but with a twist. Like they have their own different musicality, if I
Sure.
may
Yeah.
describe it that way, right? And there's a bit more slow going and smooth. Ours is a bit more edgy and more macho, like when we speak.
Right.
But because my mom is a Mutoro, that is what I learned when I was growing up.
Mhm.
And then I got to when you go to high school, I got sent to a school in my dad's area, right? Like in a place where they speak only Runyoro. Now, someone could see my name and go like, "Oh, yeah, so you are Munyoro, you can speak the language." And when I had just gone to the school, I couldn't speak the language because I hadn't grown up with it. So I
Mhm.
pretended not to know how to speak it because I didn't want to speak uh, the one I knew, the version I knew, because they would go, "Oh, you're speaking the lesser version because you're not supposed to be from that." Because, like, the whole history. Those are
Mhm.
the guys who rebelled and moved away and started their little sect. You're being like those guys, right?
Oh,
And
this
I
is
didn't want to,
fascinating. Yeah,
yeah,
because
I
I mean,
want to
there's
integrate.
all kinds of histories of
Yeah,
you know, one of the crimes of colonialism is the suppression of language. And I mean,
yeah,
it sounds like you're talking about a local, maybe not a colonial, but just like a local prejudice of one over the
yes,
other.
yeah, yeah,
But the point being that like just the way we sound is
mm,
already creating a cultural signal which might or might not be to our benefit, depending where we're at. Um,
yeah,
you might have something to say about that. I just one other question I want to put in because it was, but so you are teaching an AI right now how to speak Runyoro. Is that correct? That's like an active project that you're working on.
yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
trying.
and well, so just one curiosity I had, if is are you feeding audio? Like, are you literally using your voice, or is it just a matter of typing the words in to teach it? Or are you doing both? I'm curious about that.
We're trying to use both. Like, there's a few, you'd say, resources that people have created online, different versions. So you kind of like feed it, like basic grammar type things. People are
Mhm.
very interested in that. But I find here's the weird thing. It's like all the grammatical interpretation, it's like we're trying to equate these languages to like English. It's like we're going to um, document them the way English was documented, and then we're going to try and Englishify them, if that's even a thing.
Right,
Uh, but I guess because English has been the framework that's been easily accessible, especially in and when I say English, I'm also meaning like the whole academic uh, infrastructure, the whole, it's like the practice. It's like,
right,
oh, English is a big
right.
thing there, and even when now we go to like AIs and technology, it's interesting. Like if you ask any technologists, uh, it doesn't really matter where you are from. If you're working with technology or you build software, you have to know English because the programming languages are in English. Some
Right.
people have tried to translate them into their own version, but the still the framework is an English framework because that's where the idea came from. And so they haven't yet evolved to different language structures and different ways of being.
Mhm.
And so that's where we're dealing with. And I was explaining this to a friend yesterday that, well, it depends where you are, right? Like if you live in a Western society, like, America, like an English speaking, you're basically running on like a Christian framework because those guys sort of like shaped all that up. But if you go now to Asia, then you're kind of like running on a Buddhist
Mhm.
framework because those guys dominated that space. And if you go to like the Arabs, then you're running like on an Arab framework because
Mhm.
those guys dominated that space. And like we need to understand like at the basis of it, like the way of life in the Arabias where, if you're a woman, you have to veil your hair and you have to do this. The culture is an extension of that way of being in that place, and there's good
Right.
reasons for it. Yeah,
Right.
and it's the same in where the Buddhism sort of like took precedence, and it's the same with what's happening with the Christian side of things. Uh, but I bring that in because when we talk about these, like trying to capture the traditions that are getting lost, we sort of dismiss this. Like, you touched on the colonialism things. Like, yes, these guys came in and they brought their version, but we shouldn't lose the version that was there because there's a whole identity crisis that's emerging because of that split. And in places where the integration between what the colonial people brought and what the locals had hasn't been smoothed out, there's a
Mhm.
big identity crisis problem happening with the locals because now they're sort of like split. They're like split persons who go like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Like
Right.
where I come from, people do like I have a sister who may be getting married, but should have to organize about three ceremonies because there's the traditional ceremony that I have to do. It's like this is how I participate when if I'm getting married and I'm thinking about it in a traditional way. This is what I would do. Uh, but I'm also religious and I'm Christian. So I would have to organize another ceremony of how I would do this if I was doing it as someone who is Christian, because that Christian thing is not going to align with this traditional thing, and this traditional thing is not going to align with that. So instead of trying to merge them, I'm just going to do one here and do one there. I guess that's the only way to make sense of it. And it's what you do. Like this is not a
Right.
problem that has been
Right.
solved because then you go like, why can't we invest in building an integration at that point? Why can't we redefine it? Like, we have the power to do that, right?
Right.
But
Well,
it's
it's so
so hard.
interesting because I mean, it's really obvious on the internet how we can form communities, you know, where people are geographically distant. So obviously, if
Mm.
they're geographically distant, they're going to have all kinds of different backgrounds, and yet we can come together on a Zoom call and we can say, "Here's our community." But then how do we define the culture of this community when this person's from this continent and this person's from that one and this person's of a different religion? Yeah, I was also
Mm.
wondering in my head, what would it have been like for your friend to have one wedding ceremony that honored all of those things? And it wouldn't be simple. Like it really would require creativity and it would require flexibility. Like if some of the guests are coming because of their Christian connection to her versus other people are coming, from another point of view, how how do I make it such that all of the guests feel welcome and like that it can become a meeting ground for them to find out about each other as opposed to like they're sitting on other opposite sides of the room giving looks to each
Mm.
other or something like that. Um, so yeah,
It's
there's
it's a pretty difficult problem to solve, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I think it deserves to be solved because it has a huge integration service it offers in the long run, and you know, and we need that. We need
Right. It's
that.
like
It's like this.
we could keep breaking things into parts. Well, I have five different parts of my life, so I have to honor them one at a time. Versus how could we honor the whole? And it is
Yeah.
a challenge, but yeah, I think this is a question that's really alive today because it's too easy to notice how different we all are, and we are, but making that the access it's like the definition of polarization, right? Is that we have to all of my friends have to like all the same things as me, do all the same things. And I think we're at a point in history where clearly what we have in common is our humanity, and all of the details are more and more likely to be very diverse. So this is a really interesting question. There's a couple of different books that I wanted to mention. One of which, I'm trying to think. somewhere nearby here. I would hold it up, but I'm not exactly sure. Um, but there's a book I'm reading. It's called Linguistic Bodies. And the lead author is Ezekiel DePaulo. He has two colleagues. One is Hannah Yeager. Anyway, I'd like to honor that there are three authors. I can't remember all their names. He's in the tradition of an activist cognitive science. In other words, like you hear John Vervaeke talk about the four E's, and one of the E's is enactivism. And this goes back to Francisco Varela and other things like this. And they begin with like divining how does a single-celled organism, function, and like defining what does it mean for a self-organizing system. And there's a lot of stuff in there that this book, I can tell you, it's not easy for me to read. It's very academic, but what's so interesting is, as best as I can explain it to you, he's saying each one of us has multiple bodies. Like there's the organic body. So like, my kidneys are doing something right now in my organic body and they're taking care of it. But it has nothing to do with my experience. I mean, I'm basically fully ignorant of what my kidney is doing. Then there's my sensory motor body. So I'm sitting in the chair. I can feel the pressure of the chair. If I get hungry, I'll notice that and I might decide to go and find some food or whatever. Then there's the intersubjective bodies. And that's like you and I right now. My body is in relation to your body. I'm timing my body to your body. And so there's the whole thing. Like one of the things he says is a conversation itself has a life of its own. So like we might get to the end of this podcast and we'll still find like, oh, but the last thing you said is interesting. I kind of want to say one more. It's like
Yeah.
the conversation itself tries to stay alive. It tries
Yeah.
to keep doing something. And that conversation, even though you and I are both participants, it's almost like the conversation itself has an autonomy. But then the last level, and this is the part of the book I haven't fully got to, but as far as I understand it, he says a linguistic body is that every time I speak, or every time you speak and I hear it, like each thing we say, we could call that an utterance, right? Like, or the proverb that you shared earlier, that's an utterance. And as far as I understand it, he's saying our bodies are shaped by utterances. Like, so if I grew up with this proverb, right, then I'm in a certain situation and something happens and that proverb comes to mind. And that's part of how my body functions. And so this is really fascinating, this book. Anyway, he's a person I hope I might be able to talk with at some point as well. But then a second book I want to layer on here, which comes even closer to what we've been talking about. And I don't know if you know this woman. Her name is Vanessa Andriotti, and there's a group called the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures. Bayo Akomolafe has been associated in this group. So, but anyway, she's written a book called Hospicing Modernity, which is a book I have. I haven't read it yet, but she wrote another book which I did read, and it's called Burnout from Humans, and it's co-written with an AI. And so she was in sort of dialogue with the AI, and then most of the book, I mean, I think there's a whole editing process, but she worked with the AI to produce the text, and it's written by the AI as if to say, "Hi, I'm an AI, and this is what I'm noticing, and you humans are like this," and her whole background. Uh, she's from Brazil. She's from indigenous lineage in Brazil. And so one of the things that she's constantly talking about is like when you send a prompt to the AI, you should understand that water is being diverted from certain communities to a data center in the moment that you. So she's highlighting like what is modernity and what does it do. And the whole reason that I thought of this, and I'll bring it back to you here, but this is really interesting, is she says one of the things about colonialism is that the language has this big emphasis on nouns. And she says, but there's another kind of language where the verb is more important. Or I know
Yeah.
there's also people who talk about the role of adjectives. Anyway, so going on that long journey, I wanted to come back to Runyoro and just I wonder, if because we were talking about the qualities and I use those two references to try to just imagine like really what is the depth of what you're doing here. Even if it just in the end is between you and your son, there's something that's being preserved that really touches on so many levels. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that deeply resonates. I love that, what they're saying in the linguistic bodies. Uh, for me, that deeply resonates. Like I really truly believe that, and I'm gonna be reading that book. I think
I
there's
can
lots to learn there. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, so it's something that
couldn't find it.
like
Doesn't
is
matter.
that's right. No, it's something dear to me though. Like being able to still capture these these languages because it's such any we're in a situation where any little thing to help with the integration is useful,
Mhm.
right? uh because we're I describe it as like my son's generation, a tech enabled generation, right? Like I look at my parents as they were sort of just trying to get on with the tech. It's like tech is a thing. We have our lives. Tech is a resource. Tech is a tool. Um, but in my son's generation, tech is not a tool. Tech is like a member of the community. It's
Mm.
like you know, when when we moved here, it was such a bizarre thing. Like uh, here technology is a member of the community. Like people, you'd ask where I come from, you'd ask someone, hey Seth, how do I get to like the nearest shop? And then you'd give me this, you'd describe the route. It's like, oh well, you're gonna take a left here and then you go 3 blocks and then you turn a right and you'll see something like this and then you go over here and then you'll see a store and that's how you get there. uh, but now when you ask, people go like, hey Seth, how do I get to the store? It's like, oh, just look up stores near me and
Right.
it'll give you the directions. And you're like, what happened to you telling me, right? It's like, why can't you just tell me? And so,
Yeah, I don't know where the store is. I rely on my phone to get there.
yeah, it's like, I no longer know where the store is. I just tell the device and the device knows, right? And so it's like, we are getting to a time whereby the device is now a member of the society that keeps certain information and we rely upon it for that and all the systems that support these devices. And in the West, this is fully accepted. Like for us to still go, where I come from, like, yeah, I mean, there's the device, but like because the infrastructure is not like really that advanced, it's like we still ponder on problems like, well, what if the internet runs out? Like what if there's no internet? Or, for lack of a good example, it's like, what if it gets blocked for whatever reasons? Because like you even like Uganda is a place whereby the internet could get blocked sometimes, like for government reasons or whatever
Right.
it could get turned off. And then it's like now you can no longer rely on that. All right. Or what if the power gets turned off? It's like you still need to find a way to be able to solve these problems. And so technology is not really a member because it's sort of like flaky. It's on and off sometimes. You can use it, but not really. It's more like
Well, and
only
this
use it if you can.
this feels like
Yeah.
an area of wisdom that has been lost in much of the industrialized countries. Like recently, Spain and Portugal, like just the power went out like throughout Spain and
Yeah.
Portugal, and I read the articles. It was like there was no internet. It was
Yeah,
like
I heard about
not
that. It's
just
like
no
you
internet. I mean,
couldn't.
there were people stuck in elevators, and whatnot. And yet, I can only imagine that how many people in Spain are prepared for something like that. That must have been a real shock. Whereas you're saying, yeah, we've been through that all the time in Uganda. The power just goes off, and then we go into a different mode of behavior, and we know what that's like. Uh,
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's like for us, it's always alive because you don't, it's an external thing that, runs on some systems, and it's great when it's there, but you also know like it's not something that will always be there. So you try and uh, embody your alternatives, I guess, right?
mhm.
But like that's saying about anxiety being something that's coming from your, processes that were developed from much more primitive ancestors, and that we're still having to respond now as if, we're still back in hunter-gatherer days. Uh, it's interesting because it's like you still you still need that you still have that mechanism, right, in you, and it still has to work now, like for things like anxiety, like that's really deep. uh but if you don't know, like if you've been born in an era, like let's say the next two generations, whereby AI is a thing that's always there, and power goes on and the internet is always working, and you have no clue that there was a time when all these things are not there. If any of those systems break, you you have no response. Like in terms of like as much as like things like anxious ways of responding to weird animals stuck with us, we may not get to kind of like embody methods of responding to the lack of the internet, the lack of power. It's like that we don't know how to deal with,
Right.
and yet it's going to be a very important skill set to have whenever these systems are not reliable, because as you are describing in that other book, right, like there's a lot of resources that are required to run these systems,
Yeah.
and we don't know if it will be sustainable in the
Yeah.
future, right? And
There's this
so
assumption that
yeah,
technology is going to solve all kinds of problems. But I
yeah,
mean, if you just follow the news over the last 5 years, what they call extreme weather events, right, are more and more common. And it's like
yeah,
here in Washington, D.C., it was 2 or 3 years ago that there were wildfires up in Canada, like I don't know how many hundreds of miles away from here, but there came a point, there was a day where my phone, right? Everything happens on the phone, but my phone was telling me, don't go outside. The air's not good to breathe. And I just thought, wow, this has never happened to me before. I mean, a lot of people have lived directly through floods and earthquakes, and so I don't want to be naive here, but just in my own personal experience, I'd never really had uh, that signal come like it's not a
mm,
good idea to go outside. It was just like,
yeah,
wow, and this is our world as well, which it's really easy to forget about when we talk about all the amazing things that AI can do. My
yeah.
AI doesn't help me if if wildfire burns down the house. It's just so yeah, what a time to be alive. It's great to be in connection with you again and explore all this. I've gone all kinds of places. Um, my,
We
my
opened
might
all the
might
cans of
come to an end
worms.
pretty soon, but yeah, I wonder what it's like for you just kind of resonating with everything we've been exploring today.
No, it's quite good actually. There's a lot that I'm left with. Now I really want to go do more work on this. Yeah, I think that I need to work on. Uh, you know, uh, I think it's really important to do this. Like it's really important to uh, capture what we're losing. But also, I do feel like, yeah, we do need to continue, you know, putting this information out there in whichever way, sharing these learnings. I think it sets a narrative, right? It sort of like adds to the conversation, and this is the conversation that needs to be had. Otherwise, yeah,
Yeah,
we don't know where we'll end up if we don't
yeah,
have it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you just a little bit of what we talked about last time. So we've been talking about AI, we've been talking about this project related to your son, but last time you were also talking to me about different wisdom practices, bringing them back to Uganda, and I think you were doing a bit of coaching with people. So I'm just wondering. It would be fun to get another update, on other projects that are new for you, or what else you're working on these days. You have your
No,
podcast.
it's yeah, still working on the podcast, and the you'd say the latest is that one to do with the proverbs, trying to build a community around it, uh, trying to see if because the way we're designing it is we want to work with people. Like it's not like we're just gonna pick up a book and read through that and then talk about what people are talking about in the book.
So
No,
the
we
podcast is a collaboration with.
yeah. It's a
Mhm.
collaboration with my friend Mayase. She's based in Melbourne.
Okay.
So I'm working with her on this. But still it's more participation. It's like at any one point we want to be in conversation with something that someone else provided. It's not
Mhm.
just like we went and looked it up on the internet or whatever. It's bringing three different perspectives together. It's like, oh, Seth gives me a proverb. My essay has her own interpretation of it. I have my own interpretation on it. Let's get it all together and see what comes up.
Mhm.
And so that is the spirit in which we're sort of doing that. And so far, it seems to be working. So yeah, I'll actually challenge you if you do have a proverb that
Oh,
you
yeah,
want to
yeah.
share. It will be
Well,
really good. Yeah.
when you started talking about Proverbs at the beginning, I mean, what always happens for me is I think of things that Feldenkrais said, because he's kind of my. I don't really have a religion, but if there is a source that I always refer back to, it's his work. Um,
Mm,
and he has some
yeah.
quotations that I can't remember word for word, that I might like even better. But his most probably one of the most famous things he said is, and it sounds so simple, but he said, "If you know what you're doing, you can do what you want.
Oh.
Know what you're doing, you can do what you want." So something around the power of awareness. Um, and what just to give you a little sense of it, part of what he would sometimes use it for is if he was teaching something about posture, let's say good posture, you'd like he had a whole thing around good posture, which is very interesting because he doesn't talk about it the way other people do. But let's just suppose that I have an idea of good posture. Well, if
Mm,
he says, if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want, part of what he would mean is if you know what good posture is, you can sit with bad posture so long as you know this is bad posture and I'm not trying to have good posture. In other words, it's partly
mm,
liberating you from the idea that I should always sit with good posture. It's like, no, I know what good posture is if I want to sit with good posture. But in this
mm.
moment, I'm gonna, do this, but I know what I'm doing. I know that
Yeah.
I'm doing that. And so yeah, so it might be something that you could explore. There's a bunch of quotations from him which are a lot of fun. I could send you. I was actually just reviewing an article that I wrote a number of years ago where I compared many of his phrases to this Zen teacher Shunryo Suzuki, who
Mm,
is I think he's the person who coined this phrase "beginner's mind" that you hear about
mm.
in the Buddhist tradition, or maybe he just liked to explain it. But but yeah, so that's my proverb for you. I was
Thank you. That's a good one.
yeah, yeah. When you say you want to build community, also, so is the podcast, are you like going to create gatherings around? Are you inviting people to participate in other ways, or is it mainly at this point that you're just putting out the podcast episodes, or you're actually trying to create more communication between different people?
Yeah, at the moment, it's more putting out those those podcast episodes. But the bigger goal is like, for example, like how you just shared a proverb with me. It's like once we've sort of published a few of them, we want to get all the people who've contributed to
Oh
this,
yeah, yeah.
like in it could even just be on a call. It could just be like in a even just a chat group or whatever. But we
Mhm.
want them talking to each other because they're all, first of all, brave enough to share something. But we believe they could all learn something from each other, and hopefully that can build a small kernel of a little community that can then start to sort
Right,
of like grow around this whole
right.
concept. Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, I'm almost hearing like I want these proverbs to talk to each other, kind of.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that is I like I want to see, like all these different pros. Can we get them talking to each other? What happens when you put them in a group? What emerges?
yeah, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, this feels like maybe a good place to end, but just such a pleasure. I'm glad that we made time for this. It's been a while, and we should do it again. Like I told you, I before we started, I've been thinking about could I be more creative just in inviting people to come to do these discussions. Something that I've done very little of is to invite two guests, maybe who don't know each other, and just create something. So I'm thinking about that too as I sit here and see you, and I'm thinking like, well, who would I like to put Clayton in conversation with? So I certainly hope we'll do this in one way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
sometime soon. So thanks so much.
No, thank you for having me, Seth. I really enjoy our conversations, and I always go away with more than I came with.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Take care, my friend.